apart from a close and growing bilateral relationship. The areas of defense cooperation, space cooperation, and civil nuclear cooperation constitute the three principal pillars of our strategic partnership. Apart from these traditional fields of cooperation, India and France are increasingly engaged in new areas of cooperation like climate change, sustainable growth and development, and international solar alliance as well. Indian Navy will add more teeth to its already formidable arsenal in the coming years, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi expected to sign a deal of acquisition of 26 Rafale marine fighters for INS Vikrant aircraft carrier and a repeat order of building 3 more Scorpene class submarines at the Mazagon Dockyards Limited through Make in India. The repeat order for 3 Scorpene class submarines through the government-to-government route will not only add muscle to the Indian Navy to take up the challenge of the Chinese PLA in the Indian Ocean region, but also give a new lease of life to submarine manufacturing capacity of MDL after INS Vagshir is commissioned in the year 2024. India and France have been closely collaborating on engines for advanced fighter jets and helicopters as part of India's self-reliance program in defense. India's Defense Research and Development Organization, the DRDO, and French firm Safran are engaged in these discussions with the aim of achieving a 100% transfer of technology. France is also likely to have a UPI system with India, the very first in Europe after Singapore, which will be a giant step on digital economy. India and France friendship in all aims to advance free, secure, and a stable Indo-Pacific. That's what the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said before departing for France for a very special visit. Now let's listen in to some of the reactions we are picking up on this big visit of Prime Minister Modi to France, and then we'll head into the discussion.
बास्टिल डे पे प्रधानमंत्री जी की उपस्थिति अपने आप में एक यूनिक स्वागत है प्रधानमंत्री जी का पूरे भारत के सम्मान का ये प्रश्न है। इस बास्टिल डे में वो केवल एक अकेले मुख्य अतिथि होंगे। कई बार पास्ट में ऐसा हुआ है कि बास्टिल डे पे कई बार एक से ज्यादा भी आमंत्रित जो हैं अतिथिगण रहते हैं। जैसे कि मैंने बताया कि इस बार की बास्टिल डे की परेड में हमारा एक स्ट्रॉन्ग ट्राई सर्विसेज कंटिंजेंट भी इसमें पार्टिसिपेट करेगा और साथ में साथ हमारे भारतीय वायुसेना के 3 लड़ाकू जहाज भी जो है इसमें भाग लेंगे। इसके अलावा जैसे कि मैंने कहा प्रधानमंत्री जी के उपस्थिति में और उनके स्वागत में एक स्टेट डिनर होगा 14 तारीख को ही। एलिजे पे सेरेमोनियल वेलकम होगा, वार्ता होगी। यदि आप 14 जुलाई के जितने इवेंट्स द्विपक्षीय सहयोग और प्रधानमंत्री और राष्ट्रपति मैक्रों के बीच में वो देखें, उनकी व्यापकता को देखें, उनके विस्तार को देखें, तो आप पाएंगे कि वो अपने आप में एक यूनिक और एक अद्भुतपूर्व स्वागत होगा।
France is one of those relationships with India which tends to go under the radar. But surprisingly, Indian strategic trust in France and of late Israel has always been much higher than even strategic trust in, say, Russia or the USSR ever was. Notice trust, not the belief that they'll come intervene for you, but trust in them. When India popped its nuclear device in 1998, Russia was under Boris Yeltsin. And they weren't particularly pro-India at that time because they were heavily dependent on the West for a lot of things. And it was France, in fact, the gentleman Richier, who became ambassador to India later on, who was at the head of preventing a negative vote on India at the UN Security Council at that time. France has promised us a veto on demand. Many people don't know this. We think we have a Russian veto on demand. We also have a French veto on demand at the UN Security Council, repeatedly, on several occasions in fact. France has always been supportive, very supportive of India's ambitions because they see a very similar country, not exactly aligned or not comfortable with alignment in any sense of the word, a democracy, imperfect, all democracies are imperfect, so they don't presume to judge us in any way, unlike, say, they don't give out international quality certificates of democracy, like, say, the Anglophone countries do.
Prime Minister Modi has been visiting France with some regularity. In fact, this will probably be his 5th visit since he became Prime Minister. And that is one indication of the importance that India attaches to the relationship. One of the primary motivations in India's foreign policy, as you've seen Indian leaders articulate, is that we want to maintain the strategic autonomy of our decision-making in a multipolar world. India's efforts is to deepen the partnership with the US, sustain the relationship with Russia, and strengthen itself to deal with the challenge from China. Now, in this framework, one of the important global poles will be Europe. And therefore, India has to also strengthen its relationship with countries in Europe. One of the interesting similarities between the Indian and the French approach to international relations is that even as India strives to maintain the strategic autonomy of its decision-making, French leaders articulate that while they are part of the Western alliance system, they would like to maintain the autonomy of their decision-making. And they very often talk of the autonomy of Europe in terms of the transatlantic relations, and on Russia and on China.
So that was Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh, the former Indian ambassador to France, speaking to News9 Live of how significant this visit is. But to discuss that and a lot more on this crucial visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, we have 3 important guests lined up today. Parmit Pal Chaudhary joining us, senior journalist, Foreign Affairs. Glad to see you, sir, here. We also have General Sanjay Maston joining us to give the defense perspective of how crucial this relationship is. And of course, we have Shairi Malhotra, Associate Fellow at the ORF, very closely looking at Europe for the Observer Research Foundation. If I can begin with Mr. Chaudhary, Parmit Pal Chaudhary. Sir, how important and crucial is this visit? We've seen in the last 25 years, the strategic relationships really growing from time to time, but this is a significant relation. On different occasions, we've seen almost a blind strategic support from France, from the UNSC to the nuclear deal to even Kashmir. France has been an open support for India. So how significant is this particular visit, and particularly on the defense front, do we see making more important signatures there in France, or perhaps on the transfer of technology as well, making more strides?
Yeah, I think the real reason why this trip, as is true for a lot of the trips that Prime Minister Modi is making overseas, is significant, is that the geopolitical circumstances that in many ways were stable over the past 2 decades have changed significantly. The rise of China is now overwhelmingly India's primary strategic concern. France has been an Indo-Pacific partner, especially an Indian Ocean partner for us. It's the only European nation with a genuine military and physical presence in the Indian Ocean. But France hasn't necessarily been that open about taking on China. And we can see that China, they accept that China is a competitor and a problem, but perhaps do not completely agree with us yet, or are not aligned with us as to the degree of the threat that we see in China, not just militarily, but in terms of technology and economically. And I think we're going to see a lot more, negotiations on that front. The second part is the decline of Russia. Russia is now much reduced in terms of its symbolic power after its problems in the Ukraine. But more importantly is that increasing evidence, especially we talk to Indian officials, of Russia's losing its ability to maintain an independent line of action again from China. If that continues, then India will obviously going to have problems in maintaining the kind of high-level relationship it has with Russia. This opens up a very different kind of relationship with France, because more so than any other Western country, France is in many ways capable of filling in the blanks that our Russia relationship could possibly leave behind. They have a nuclear submarine capacity, both ballistic and attack. They have nuclear powered aircraft carriers. They have an entire panoply of weapons without the kind of restrictions and problems in accessing technology that the United States, for example, has. The only other country in the West that has similar array of technologies. So this is one of the things we're going to be talking about, I think. And my understanding is there has been continuing negotiations, especially on the issue of submarines. When Prime Minister Modi was supposed to have gone to London for the G7 summit, then was cancelled. He couldn't go. He had to go virtual because of the COVID issue. On his return trip, he was supposed to stop at Toulon in France to see the launching of the latest Barracuda nuclear submarine. And in fact, I think it was going to be shown a tour of that submarine for a very obvious reason. The French wanted to showcase these products. So this is the kind of thing we're now going to have to look at. In other words, take this new relationship, already very solid, to a completely new level. And that's where to fit in with these new geopolitical circumstances.
Fair enough. But to get a perspective specifically on the defense ties, let me get in General Sanjay Meston here. General, how do you see the defense cooperation really growing? We've seen a lot of enthusiasm in India in the last couple of years on the Rafale, and now we see a reorder for the Rafale, particularly for the Indian Navy, the Marine, and of course the subs as well. So how do you see the defense cooperation growing from strength to strength?
As regards defense cooperation is concerned, firstly, I must highlight one very, very important aspect before I answer your question is that we all are aware that India was quite dependent on Russia just maybe about 2 or 3 decades back. Actually, our entire inventory was of Russian origin. And I think post-Kargil, when I was myself in the Operational Logistics Directorate of the Indian Army as a Lieutenant Colonel, we did realize that the weapon systems and the spare parts and lubricants and greases were not forthcoming, and the Russians were actually causing us genuine problems. And since that time, we realized that we in India need to diversify our sources, and that itself is a great strength of security. And in the last 2 or 3 decades, or I would say 2 decades, we have diversified so much that we are getting weapon systems from possible all the leading countries of the world, including America, France, Germany, Sweden, Israel, and so forth. And with each country, we go in for the specialist systems which each country can offer to us. And today, with the Atmanirbhar Bharat concept and self-reliance, what Prime Minister Modi has been advocating, I think India has now gone very firmly on transfer of technology, and co-production is over. But now we are looking for co-development also. And therefore, today, whether it is France, whether it is United States, all these countries have realized that India's potential is far too much, and especially our youth, the IT youth and talented and the technical expertise what we have, our youth is simply brilliant. And therefore, these countries have actually realized that to invest in India and to have transfer of technology and co-development, now focus is more on co-development of the critical technologies, emerging technologies. So I think on that account, I personally feel that India is doing exceedingly well by diversifying. And similarly, now with France, we have taken one of the best fighter aircrafts. We got the 36 Rafale. Now, as regards the defense cooperation with France is concerned, I myself as a colonel was handling the foreign division of the Indian Army, and I happened to travel to many other countries, including France, and we used to get their foreign chiefs also.
Right.
So most of the foreign chiefs, they used to highlight certain very good qualities of the Indian Army. Firstly, the regimentation. They were really proud of a regimentation, and that is what gives solid kick to our soldiers. We die for a regiment. An infantry soldier, for him, his platoon or regiment is so important. And these foreigners also realize the ethos, the values which we have imbibed over a period of time, and our training is so good, and our capability to handle all kinds of weapon systems from all over the world, from wherever we have got, and the technical expertise, including in the armed forces, of handling the latest equipment, whether it is electronics or anything. So therefore, these countries have realized our potential. And coming on to France, we are aware about the Rafale, and now we are also planning, I'm quite sure they are going to offer the Rafale M for the Indian Navy, which is required for our aircraft ships. So this will increase the potential and we'll enhance our homogeneity, because it's not only the aircraft, the spare parts, the MRO, that is maintenance, repair, overhaul. All these facilities now France would be compelled to give to us, and we will be doing everything jointly.
Right.
So I think in every manner, then Scorpene deal, as it is, the Scorpene submarine is going to be out. So in every manner, we are benefiting, and not only that, we are doing joint training and counter terrorism. We are sharing intelligence, and I think the previous speaker did mention about that they have taken a very positive stand towards India on Kashmir, etc. And therefore, word of counter intelligence, counter terrorism, we have to have the intelligence sharing, joint training, sharing of information. All these aspects are focused onto. So
fair
to
enough,
sum it
fair
up,
enough. You make a strong point, General, talking about the potential in the relationship, and also about the Rafale and the subs that will really add to India's arsenal. But I will come to you and of course Mr. Chaudhary as well on the jet engine, on the transfer of technology and the technicalities of it all. But I want to get in Shairi here, who's been studying Europe very closely and trying to understand the perspective of these relationships. Shairi, we were speaking earlier in the day as well, where you mentioned that this is a very strong partnership, but there is much more to do as well, particularly on trade. How would you define these 25 years of strategic cooperation between India and France? What are we really looking towards in the next 25 years now?
Well, I think, of course, we know this year marks the 25th anniversary of the strategic partnership. And, this was India's first strategic partnership that was signed in 1998. In total, India has about 35 of them, and the first one was signed with France. So that gives us an indication of how much value India attaches to this relationship, how continuous that value has been. And I would say that this is a very wholesome, all-encompassing relationship that spans, collaboration across a range of sectors, including, of course, security and defense, but also things like climate change, energy transition, the blue economy, counterterrorism, and even multilateralism. Defense is, of course, the strongest pillar of the partnership, but when it comes to things like climate change, India and France launched the International Solar Alliance in 2015, which now members about 100 odd countries. There's also cooperation on the multilateral front, where France supports India's bid for a permanent seat at the UN Security Council, and even on counterterrorism, both India and France have been fighting this aspect together. France has also been supportive of India's concerns, be it at the United Nations or at other international bodies like the Financial Action Task Force. Another important way that India and France are cooperating is through trilateral partnerships that have recently been signed with like-minded countries such as Australia and the UAE. And I would say the real aim of these partnerships is to really address security issues, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. And in this context, the two countries, are funding development projects in the region together. They're conducting military exercises together, and they're trying, in a sense, to cooperate on solving even global challenges together. But yes, you mentioned the area of trade, and I would say this is where the relationship perhaps has lagged behind a little. Last year, bilateral trade, between India and France stood at about $16 billion, which has increased year on year consistently, but it still does lag behind its potential. And I think this visit by Prime Minister Modi also intends to address this lag. There's a CEO's business forum that is being planned with heads of business participating from both sides. But I would add that, the real boost to trade between India and France would actually come from the conclusion of an EU-India FTA. And negotiations for this were relaunched last year, and several rounds have already been conducted. And I think this is where the real untapped potential can be unleashed.
Well, certainly a great potential on trade as well. But will that happen there is a beginning that is being made with the CEOs meeting that will be taking place with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and of course the French President as well. Let's wait for that meeting to take place and to get more details. But as I was mentioning, let's get into the technicalities as well. Let's get in Parmeet Pal Chaudhary yet again. Mr. Chaudhary, recently concluded US visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The big talking point was the transfer of technology. It was also about the jet engines and its production in India. There have been different statements that are coming in. The entire 100% sharing of technology hasn't really been mentioned anywhere. But will that at all happen? Perhaps time will tell. Again, with France, there have been discussions between the DRDO and Safran about transfer of technology. Do you think France increasingly realizes that this is something that India has been asking for and perhaps there could be some consensus on that?
Yes, I think we've seen that there's at least some sort of a competition going on, which is good for India. We used to ask for help on request jet engine technology and was generally received. This was either spurned or the price tag that was offered was so incredibly high that it was obviously the equivalent of a no. Now we effectively have three offers on the table. We have the Americans who have jumped in recently with the GE engine 414. We have had a Safran one, but which now seems to be much better than its previous versions, and we have a Rolls-Royce British offer as well for their next generation engine. So it is very clear that now for the Tejas 2 at least, Tejas 1 and 2, we will continue to use a GE engine, but those engines will now be manufactured in India, and this will give us the opportunity to master the technologies, the 11 technologies that the Americans have agreed to pass on to us. The next generation for our advanced medium combat aircraft, that engine is what we now need to be looking for a partner. And as I said, we now have three when we originally just had basically zero. So that's an excellent development for us. Which of them we will choose, I think, will depend on a number of factors: geopolitical, price, technology, but also which ones are technologically, should we say, which one is technologically more in line with our capacities. We have to recognize building a jet engine is incredibly difficult. The turbine, only 4 countries in the world today know how to make them. Countries like Japan and Germany, engineering superpowers, do not make jet engines. So this will be a major challenge, but it is good to have more offers on the table. I think Safran's advantage will be that because of our experience with the Mirages, which are also powered by Safran engines, we have already a reasonably large ecosystem of Indian contractors who are familiar with bits and pieces of the engine. But it is the top quality technologies, notably the turbine, which is not a piece of metal. It is actually a giant crystal, ferrocrystal, almost grown into that shape. These type of technologies will be a huge challenge for us. And which country helps us the most, or is technologies, or should we say, ones that we are able to absorb, and I think will be the crucial determinants of which one we have. But again, the more offers on the table, the better.
Absolutely. The more offers, the better. But of course, in particular, jet engine is something there are very few companies who have mastered it globally, perhaps only 4 companies in 3 countries. And there are others who have been doing the reverse engineering. Where India will set its eyes is perhaps to be clear in the next few months, but already there have been talks and signing of agreements in US, and perhaps there's one lined up in France as well. General Maston, I want to understand from you on the chemistry between Modi and Macron, and also the co-development that you were talking about. Do you think there is further scope and potential in the defense sector as well? As I mentioned earlier, DRDO and Safran have been in talks, and perhaps there will be a kind of a roadmap that will be arrived at, if not this time, perhaps in a few months from now?
Yeah, definitely. 2 issues you have asked. One is the chemistry between Macron and Prime Minister Modi. I think one thing to the credit of Honorable Prime Minister, that is body language, and especially his versatility in knowing everything. I think he is a great statesman. As a global statesman, I would rate him. He has got a very, very good idea about everything, whether it is economics, international relations, defense, everything. including climate change. So he's an all-rounder, and therefore, obviously, he fits into any slot with any leader of the world, whether it is Putin or whether it is any top leader of the world. And today, I think President Modi is termed as a global leader. And today, many of the countries, responsible countries, France, US, UK, most of them are looking for a very responsible role for India, especially even in the Russia-Ukraine war, because finally this war is making no headway. And everyone, including NATO, is now looking, the West is also looking, and President Zelensky is also looking for some kind of peace initiatives to be taken. And probably one should not be surprised that during this meeting between President Macron and Prime Minister Modi, I think this issue will also be discussed, because this war is certainly affecting Europe the most, because it is closest, though it is affecting the entire world, but it is actually a European war also. So I think there would be a lot of internal discussion between the two top leaders, and we should not be surprised that thereafter Prime Minister Modi, and especially now we are also heading the G20, I think some kind of initiative our Prime Minister will take. And as regards Macron is also concerned, I think he as a leader, he also maintains his stance very, very clear, and he appreciates India's stance of strategic autonomy.
Right.
They understand our constraints. So they realize that today India cannot be bulldozed by any nation. We maintain our strategic autonomy, and therefore it is our birthright or duty to be maintaining relations with anyone the way we feel it is in our national core interest. So to that extent, I think he is one of the leaders who understands India's requirements, and they have been pitching for the UNSC seat for India, and supported in Kashmir. So obviously the chemistry is too good.
Right.
Coming on to the defense which you asked, I think we have a lot of scope between India and France. And I actually perhaps feel, because having been to so many countries and dealing with so many of these things, I think I would say that somehow I found dealing with the French was always much easier than dealing with, I would say, even the Israelis, the Russians, or anyone. The French were quite, I would say, understanding the Indian requirements, and they would understand a concern, right, despite the language barrier. See, that was a big barrier, and including in the United Nations, today we have French and Indian contingents, and we have served together in so many missions. I myself was in Rwanda and Mozambique with them. So I found to them very receptive towards the Indian requirement, and therefore, personally, I feel it's going to be a great leap ahead as regards the defense cooperation is concerned between the two nations. And I think one of the panelists brought out that it was with France, actually, we started our strategic partnership. So I have no doubts that with France, we will continue, and we should not be surprised that in the near future, perhaps we'll start getting even nuclear submarines from
Absolutely.
France, nuclear propelled submarines, which Australia actually was looking for, and we are aware then finally they shifted their stance, and that stayed the relation between Australia and France.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely. We'll take that forward, General Maston, but we have more reactions coming in. You rightly pointed out that with France, it has been easier to deal with. They have been much calmer and cooperative. We have two reactions coming up from people who have been taking these relations forward. The Indian ambassador to France, Javed Ashraf, and Emanuel Macron, who is the French ambassador to India. Let's listen in.
Very big moment for India and France. We are celebrating 25 years of our strategic partnership. This was the first strategic partnership that India signed with any country in 1998. And if you look back, that was not exactly a very good time for India. The world had changed completely after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. India was just in the early stages of its economic reforms, still hadn't come out of economic difficulties. It didn't have the kind of relationships around the world that it has today. It didn't certainly have many friends in the Western countries. And it is at that point of time that India and France signed the Strategic Partnership Agreement. Since then, our relationship has transformed dramatically over the past 25 years. So this is a moment to celebrate 25 years of our strategic partnership, an extraordinary journey. But it is also a time to look ahead with greater confidence, optimism, and ambition to this partnership in the next 25 years and beyond.
Partnership between France and India, there is trust. We know that we can commit for years, for decades, and we won't change our mind. And that's really important. We've been showing that for decades. I mean, each time each of us country needed a partner, he's been there, and that's very important. So that allows us to bet and to develop jointly technologies which needs years and years and will be used for decades. That's true in the defense sector. That's true also maybe one day for nuclear energy. That will be also true for other technologies. So yes, we have decided to work on the defense sector together. It's important for our strategic autonomy. We work in a spirit of partnership. I mean, French companies have been the pioneer for years of Make in India, and now they totally understood the philosophy of Atmar Nir Barbarat, and they really want to share their best technologies and to develop jointly the equipment of the future.
Ambassador Emanuel Macron speaking to media about the relations, the strategic economy, and what we should look forward to. Let me bring in Shairi here. Shairi, we've seen Vinay Quatra, India's Foreign Secretary, speak about rich substance in this particular visit and how it will be making new strides. As well, the strategic partnership will be taken to a new level. But there's a lot of symbolism also involved in this particular visit. Of course, tomorrow is that big Bastille Day parade, which of course Prime Minister Manmohan Singh also attended in the past. This time also the tri-service will be marching to Sare Jahan Se Acha. How important is the symbolism really associated with this particular visit as well? How significant is Prime Minister Modi being invited as guest of honor? And not just that, there is an address to the Indian community there, and of course a private dinner by President Macron.
Yeah, I think this is a very symbolic visit. To be invited at the Bastille Day, which is a key symbol of the French Republic, and the parade is similar to what we have in India on the Republic Day. And just to add that on India's Republic Day, there have been five times French presidents have been invited as chief guests, and that is the maximum that invitations that have been extended to any country. And for Prime Minister Modi to be invited now to attend France's Bastille Day parade is definitely a rare honor. It's usually only accorded to France's topmost allies. Previous attendees have been German Chancellor Angela Merkel. In 2017, it was President Donald Trump. And of course, in 2009, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was also a chief guest at the Bastille Day parade. And as you mentioned, there's going to be this grand state banquet dinner at the Louvre as well. And another thing that's really rare is the fact that there's going to be a foreign contingent participating in the Bastille Day parade. There's going to be a sizable Indian contingent at this time. And also some of the Rafales that India has bought from France will also be participating in the parade. So definitely all of these gestures are very special. They're very symbolic. But I will say that in the case of India and France, symbolism does come with substance because this is a very substantial partnership. And I think this visit by Prime Minister Modi will pave the way for President Macron's scheduled visit to India, which is likely to take place sometime in September.
All right, it's not just symbolism, it is substance as well. This particular relationship has been 25 years of strategic partnership between India and France. Prime Minister Narendra Modi in exactly 1.5 hours from now will be landing in Paris. He has a busy day ahead, and towards the end of it at around 12:30 a.m. India time, he'll be hosted by President Macron to a special private state dinner. We will be getting you more details on that important visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to France. Tomorrow he will be guest of honor at the Bastille Day, where the Indian Army, the Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force will be marching to Sare Jahan Se Acha, and we'll have the Rafales also on display. Let's end it here, but keep watching Newsnight Live. Thanks for joining in.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place. This is Asia's largest mountain of shame.
A mountain of waste, almost the height of the Qutub Minar.
When you enter capital cities of some of the biggest countries in the world, you don't have 3 garbage mountains waiting to welcome you depending on whichever side of the city you enter from.
The thing is that a lot of times we talk about landfills only when there's a fire at the landfill. You need to understand that a landfill is at fire almost throughout the year. It's only when the firefighters are not able to douse the fire is when it actually catches the nation's attention, the city's attention, or media attention.
The towering landfills worsen one of Delhi's biggest problems: pollution.
यहाँ पर आप रात को आओ, दिन में आओ, आप 1 घंटे बैठ नहीं सकते बाहर। इतनी धूल, प्रदूषण, महक, आप खाना भी नहीं खा सकते बाहर बैठ के।
Life around the landfill is a curse.
हमारे घर में जो बड़े हैं उन्हें अस्थमा के वो पेशेंट है, आए दिन उनको नेबुलाइजर लगाना पड़ता है।
डॉक्टर ने मुझे ये चीज बोला कि यहाँ का एरिया छोड़ के कहीं और जाइए।
Delhi's garbage mountains are now a fetid symbol of the national capital's trash problem. The question is, who is to be blamed? Watch Delhi's Garbage Mountains. Streaming on News 9 Plus for the Genflix.
ChatGPT. It can generate codes and human-like responses through text, write stories, and do a lot more.
I work in a newsroom with anchors, researchers and scriptwriters, graphic artists, producers, video editors, camera crew. But does a newsroom really need them today? All of us have to think about unique and distinctive value addition that cannot be automated or repeated or replaced by a machine.
ChatGPT may kill many companies.
A human has to be in the loop with an ability to control this.
Dark Side of the Boom. Streaming now.
This is a war zone. These people, victims of terror. They are haunted by a monster. A beast that has killed more people than any tiger in the last decade. This is a glimpse of a conflict that shows no signs of abating. The man-animal conflict has killed thousands of people and over 400 elephants in the last 4 years. This is the story of India's rogue tuskers.
നാലരയാകുമ്പോൾ വന്ന് വീട് തള്ളി. അപ്പം ഞങ്ങൾ ഉറങ്ങില്ല. ഞാൻ ഒച്ച കേട്ടപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ അവിടെ പോയി ജനലിൽ തുറന്ന് പുറത്തേക്ക് നോക്കുക. അന്നേരം ആന ഇവിടെ ഉണ്ട്. ഞാൻ അപ്പുറത്ത് തുറന്ന് നോക്കിയപ്പോൾ ആന ഇവിടെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഞങ്ങൾ പതുക്കെ കതക് തള്ളി തുറന്നിട്ട് പെരക്കകത്ത് കൈയിട്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ തപ്പുക. അന്നേരം ഞങ്ങളുടെ കയ്യിൽ ഒന്നുമില്ലായിരുന്നു. അടുപ്പിൻ്റെ അവിടെയാ എല്ലാം തീപ്പെട്ടി. അടുപ്പിൻ്റെ അടിയിൽ നമ്മൾ തീയൊക്കെ പോയിക്കുവാണെങ്കിൽ അടുപ്പിൻ്റെ അടിയിൽ ആന പെരക്കകത്ത് കൈയിട്ട് തപ്പുക. അത് ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഒന്നും ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റിയല്ലേ. ലാസ്റ്റ് പെരക്കകത്ത് ആന കയറും. ഒറ്റ കാലെടുത്ത് വെച്ച പിന്നെയാ ഇറങ്ങി ഞങ്ങൾ ഓടി.
These are the crumbling remains of 42-year-old Emily's life. 2 decades of cherished memories. A home of her own demolished. Tragic as they are, incidents like these are increasingly frequent in 14 states in India. Chinnakanal in Idukki, Kerala is but one hotspot for fear and death in elephant country. Just 10 kilometers from the scenic hill town of Chinnakanal, Suryanali once had a population of over 500 people. Today, this village is home to just 2 families. The rest have been forced to flee. For those who remain, the spectre of death is always lurking.
ആ വീടിൻ്റെ അവിടെ നിന്ന് ഇങ്ങനെ വന്ന് ക്രോസിങ് വന്ന് ഈ വഴി കൂടെ വന്ന് ഈ വേലിക്കകത്ത് കയറി ആ ഡിഷ് വലിച്ചെറിയുമ്പോൾ ഡിഷ് വലിച്ചെറിയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കിനാണ് ഞാൻ അറിഞ്ഞതും പിള്ളേരെ വിളിക്കുന്നതും ആനെ കണ്ടതും ഈ ഇരുട്ടത്ത് 1 മണി 2 മണി ആയപ്പോൾ കാട്ടിക്കൂടെ ഓടുകയൊക്കെ ചെയ്ത് അടുത്ത വീട്ടിൽ പോയി രക്ഷപ്പെട്ടു. പോകാനൊരു വഴിയില്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് ചത്താലും ഇവിടെ നിൽക്കണമെന്നുള്ള വേറെ ഇടമില്ലല്ലോ ഞങ്ങൾക്ക്. സർക്കാരിൽ നിന്ന് തന്ന സ്ഥലം 5 സെന്റ് സ്ഥലം നമുക്ക് വേറെ എങ്ങും ഇല്ലല്ലോ. എൻ്റെ വകയായിട്ടോ കെട്ടിൻ്റെ വകയായിട്ടോ ഇല്ല. അങ്ങനെ സർക്കാരാകുന്ന ഓരോരുത്തർ തന്നു. എത്ര കഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടാണ് ഞങ്ങൾ ഇവിടെ തന്നെ കഴിയുന്നത്. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് വേറെ വഴിയുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഞങ്ങൾ എല്ലാവരും പോയല്ലോ, ഞങ്ങൾ അങ്ങോട്ട് തന്നെ പോകുള്ളൂ.
49-year-old Leela did not always face this danger. She came to Suryanali in 2003 as part of a government rehabilitation scheme. Back then, Suryanali was a newly created tribal colony. The government had allocated every tribal family 1 acre of land. Here Leela built a new life. This is what is left of her home. The beast that attacked Leela's home is Arikomban, Chinnakanal's rogue tusker. For over 2 decades, Arikomban has roamed the high ranges of Chinnakanal. In that time, he's killed over 10 people and injured many more. But he's not alone. Chinnakanal is home to 2 more rogue elephants, Chakakumban and Murivala.
The wild tuskers of Chinnakanal have gained public notoriety. Today, they can easily be identified through their own distinct characteristics, personalities, and even names. Murivalan is named for his chopped tail, Chakakomban for his habit of stealing chakka or jackfruit. But the most infamous is Arikomban, named for his habit of raiding farms and shops in search of rice or ari. In the high ranges of Chinnakanal, nothing and no one stands in their way.
If you look at overall behavior of elephants and the bulls, there's an hypothesis called the high risk, high gain strategy. So the bulls being alone, they take this liberty of, taking that extra risk of reaching out to people, places for resource, and in the process, when they come in interaction with the human beings, the conflict happens. But also at times, these bulls are in a condition of must, which is, a increased level of testosterone in the body, and they are at aggressive stage. So those are also stages when the elephant comes and interact with human beings, the conflict scenarios increases.
"2023 has seen massive protests in Idukki, where locals shut down the town. Their demand? Relocation of Arikomban. Giving in to the protests, the state government first set out to capture Arikomban so as to confine it to the Kodanad elephant camp. The move was foiled when the matter was brought before the Kerala High Court on March 23rd. A specially constituted committee then decided to move the tusker to the Parambikulam Tiger Reserve. This sparked counter-protests in Palakkad and Thrissur by villagers wary of an elephant notorious for death and destruction. The matter was then brought to the Supreme Court, which refused to intervene in the matter, bringing the ball back into the court for the Kerala government. Like Leela, 38-year-old Rajamma too came to Chinnakanal in the early 2000s. The Kerala government's Tribal Resettlement and Development Mission created the 301 or the 301 colony. Rajamma spent a lifetime here and raised 2 daughters with her husband. She